So, I completely forgot to tell my son that the camera was working again, and when I checked the footage, I froze. My blood ran cold, and I honestly didn't know what to do. Was I wrong for not telling him? Tell me, would you have done the same thing if you were in my shoes? Or am I completely out of line for what I saw? Let me take you back to the beginning of all this, to a time when life felt a lot simpler, even if it was still a bit chaotic. I'm a single dad, and it's been just me and my son, Jake, for the past 10 years. His mom, my ex-wife, left when he was 5, and honestly, it was a messy divorce that left both of us pretty scarred. I tried my best to be both a mother and a father figure to fill that void, but I know I wasn't always successful. Jake was a good kid, mostly. He was a bright student, loved video games, and had a small but loyal group of friends. We lived in a quiet suburban house, nothing fancy, just comfortable. My job as a software engineer kept me busy, often working late, which meant Jake spent a lot of time by himself after school. This is where the issues started, or at least, where they became apparent. Jake was 15, a typical teenager in many ways, but lately, I noticed a shift. He was becoming more withdrawn, spending even more time locked in his room, and his grades, which had always been a point of pride for him, started to slip. I tried talking to him, of course. "What's going on, buddy?" I'd ask, trying to keep my voice light and non-confrontational. "Everything okay at school? With your friends?" He'd just shrug, mumble something about being tired or having a lot of homework, and retreat further into his shell. It was frustrating, to say the least. I felt like I was losing him, and I didn't know how to bridge the gap. One evening, I was going through the mail and found a letter from Jake's school. It was a notice about his attendance and declining performance in a couple of subjects, specifically math and English, which used to be his strongest. My heart sank. This wasn't just a phase. Something was genuinely wrong. I confronted him that night, holding the letter in my hand. He looked at it, then at me, with a mixture of defiance and a fleeting flicker of something I couldn't quite place, maybe fear, maybe shame. "It's nothing, Dad," he said, trying to sound nonchalant, but his voice cracked slightly. "Just a tough semester. I'll fix it." I wanted to believe him. I really did, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. That's when I decided I needed to understand what was happening. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I was worried. Worried about who he was spending his time with, worried about what he was doing when I wasn't around. I'd always been pretty liberal with his privacy, believing that trust was earned and given freely. But this felt different. This felt like a cry for help, or at least a situation that required more than just a trusting shrug. A few months prior, I had installed a security camera in the living room. It wasn't for monitoring Jake, not primarily, but for general home security. There had been a few break-ins in the neighborhood, and it gave me peace of mind. About a month before this letter arrived, the camera had malfunctioned. It just stopped recording, displaying a connection error message on my phone app. I'd meant to fix it, or at least call someone to look at it, but life got in the way. Work, bills, daily chores, you know how it is. It slipped my mind. Until now. Now, with this growing unease about Jake, the camera suddenly seemed like a potential solution. Not a perfect one, not one I felt entirely comfortable with, but a desperate measure for a desperate situation. I'm not proud of thinking this way, of feeling like I needed to spy on my own son, but parental instinct is a powerful thing. I wanted to protect him, and I genuinely believed he was getting into something he shouldn't be. So late that night after Jake was asleep, I went down to the living room. I fiddled with the camera, unplugged it, plugged it back in, and checked the app. To my surprise, it reconnected. A live feed of my empty living room appeared on my phone screen. It had been a simple reset, something I should have tried ages ago. A wave of relief, mixed with a knot of guilt, washed over me. The camera was working again. And that's the crucial part. I forgot to tell Jake. It wasn't malicious, not intentionally. It was just an oversight in a moment of stress and worry. I was so focused on the idea of finally getting some answers, on understanding what was going on with my son, that the simple act of informing him slipped my mind. The next few days were a blur of work and silent anxiety at home. Jake continued his pattern of coming home from school, grabbing a snack, and disappearing into his room. He'd emerge for dinner, eat quickly, and then vanish again. Our conversations were brief, superficial. I felt like we were roommates rather than father and son. During this time, I started checking the camera feed. Not constantly, not obsessively, but periodically. Usually it was just the empty living room, the quiet house. Sometimes, I'd see Jake walk through, a quick glance at his back as he headed to his room or the kitchen. Nothing out of the ordinary. And then came Tuesday afternoon. I was at work, immersed in a complex coding problem, when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the living room camera. I usually ignored them if I knew Jake was home, but today, a strange compulsion made me tap the notification. The feed loaded, and what I saw made my blood run cold. It wasn't Jake alone. He was sitting on the sofa, and next to him was a girl I'd never seen before. She looked about his age, maybe a year older, with bright pink hair and a nose ring. She was laughing, a loud, somewhat abrasive laugh, and Jake was smiling, a genuine, wide smile that I hadn't seen on his face in months. He looked happy, truly happy, which should have been a relief. But it wasn't. The relief was overshadowed by a creeping dread. They were talking animatedly. I couldn't hear what they were saying, of course, because the camera didn't have audio capabilities, which, in hindsight, I was both thankful for and frustrated by. But their body language told a story. They were close, leaning into each other, and Jake kept glancing at her with an intensity that was unmistakable. Then things started to escalate. The girl reached for a small, cylindrical object from her backpack. My heart hammered against my ribs. It looked like a vape pen. Jake took it from her, hesitated for a second, and then brought it to his lips. A cloud of vapor puffed out, and the girl clapped, a triumphant grin on her face. My hands started to shake. Vaping. My son was vaping. I knew it was popular among teenagers, but I had always hoped Jake wouldn't get involved. I had talked to him about the dangers, the unknown long-term effects. He had always assured me he wouldn't touch that stuff. My disappointment was a bitter taste in my mouth. But that wasn't all. The girl then pulled out a small plastic baggie. Even from the grainy camera footage, the contents were clear. A leafy green substance. Marijuana. My breath hitched. This wasn't just vaping anymore. This was something far more serious. Jake looked at the baggie, then at the girl, a hesitant expression on his face. She nudged him, whispered something, and then he reached for it. My mind raced. What was I seeing? Was this a one-time thing? Was he being pressured? Or had this been going on for a while? The questions swirled, each one more alarming than the last. I watched, paralyzed, as they shared the substance. They laughed, their movements becoming a little looser, a little more exaggerated. I saw my son, my quiet, thoughtful son, becoming someone I didn't recognize. This went on for about an hour. They eventually packed up, the girl leaving first, giving Jake a quick, lingering hug. Then Jake went upstairs. I sat there at my desk, staring at the frozen image on my phone, my living room now empty again. My head was spinning. The betrayal I felt was immense, not just from Jake, but from myself. I had been so focused on trusting him, on giving him space, that I hadn't seen the signs. Or maybe I had seen them, but I had been too afraid to acknowledge what they meant. I called my best friend, Mark, immediately. He's also a single dad. His daughter is a couple of years older than Jake. He's always been my go-to for parental advice, a sounding board for all my anxieties. I explained everything, my voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to do, Mark, I confessed, running a hand through my hair. He's smoking weed, he's with this girl I don't know, and I saw it all on the camera. I didn't tell him was working again. Mark was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Okay, first take a deep breath. It's bad. Yeah, but it's not the end of the world. A lot of kids experiment. But the way you found out, that's tricky." He paused, then added, "You have to confront him. But how you approach it, that's key. And the camera, that's going to be a problem." I knew he was right. The camera was the elephant in the room. How could I tell Jake what I saw without admitting I had essentially spied on him? It felt like a double betrayal. I spent the rest of the workday in a fog. My coding problem seemed insignificant compared to the real-life problem unfolding at home. When I finally drove home, the tension in my chest was almost unbearable. I rehearsed conversations in my head, imagined Jake's reactions, his anger, his disappointment in me. I considered pretending I had found evidence some other way, maybe a smell, or seeing the girl leave. But that felt dishonest, and I prided myself on always being honest with Jake, even when it was difficult. The house was quiet when I walked in. Jake was, predictably, in his room. I went in my office, tried to work, but my mind kept replaying the images from the camera. I kept seeing Jake smile, that genuine happiness, juxtaposed with the vape pen and the baggie. It tore me apart. I ordered a pizza for dinner, hoping a casual, familiar meal might ease the tension, or at least provide a neutral ground for conversation. Jake came down, still in his hoodie, his eyes a little bloodshot. He ate in silence, picking at his slices. I tried to make small talk about school, about his day, but he just grunted noncommittally. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I cleared my throat, my heart thumping. Jake, I started, trying to keep my voice even. We need to talk. He looked up, a wary expression on his face. About what, Dad? About your grades, for one. And about some other things. He stiffened. I told you I'll fix my grades. It's more than that, son, I said, pushing the pizza box aside. I saw something today. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion. What are you talking about? And that's where I hesitated. How do I say it? How do I admit to watching him? I looked at his face, at the emerging stubble, the subtle defiance, and the underlying vulnerability I knew was still there. I took a deep breath. The living room camera, I began, my voice barely a whisper. It started working again. I forgot to tell you. His jaw tightened. He knew instantly. The color drained from his face, replaced by a flush of anger. You what? He hissed, his voice low and dangerous. You spied on me? No, Jake, not spied. I tried to explain, my words stumbling over each other. I was worried about you, about your grades, about everything. The camera just happened to start working and I saw a notification and... He pushed his chair back, scraping it loudly against the floor. You saw me? You saw everything. His voice was rising now, filled with a mixture of rage and humiliation. You think that's okay, Dad? To just watch me without me knowing? That's a complete invasion of my privacy. I know, I said, trying to calm him, trying to make him understand my fear. But Jake, what I saw, it wasn't good. You were smoking weed. With that girl. Who is she? It's none of your business, he yelled, standing up abruptly. His eyes were blazing. You had no right. You think you're helping? You're just making everything worse. He stormed out of the kitchen, his footsteps heavy as he ran up the stairs and slammed his bedroom door. I sat there, the uneaten pizza growing cold, the silence of the house pressing down on me. It was worse than I expected. The confrontation about the camera had completely overshadowed the actual issue of the drugs. I had alienated him, pushed him further away, all in an attempt to pull him closer. The next few days were a living hell. Jake wouldn't talk to me. He communicated only in monosyllabic grunts, avoided eye contact, and spent every waking moment he wasn't at school locked in his room. The house felt like a battleground, even when it was silent. I tried to apologize, to explain my intentions, to tell him how scared I was for him. I slipped notes under his door, left his favorite snacks outside his room. Nothing. He was an impenetrable wall of adolescent anger. I called Mark again, desperate. It's a disaster, I told him. He hates me. He won't even look at me. Mark listened patiently. Look, man, he's a teenager. He's going to be angry. You invaded his privacy, even if it was for his own good. But you also caught him doing something dangerous. You have to ride this out. Give him some space, but don't give up. The most important thing is that he knows you care, even if he doesn't want to hear it right now. That night, I couldn't sleep. The guilt gnawed at me. Had I made the right choice? Was the camera a necessary evil, or had I crossed a line that I could never uncross? I tossed and turned, replaying the camera footage in my mind, seeing Jake's innocent face, then the change, the defiance, the anger. The image of him with the vape and the baggie haunted me. I knew I couldn't just let it go. It wasn't about catching him in the act. It was about his well-being, his future. I understood his anger about the camera, but his health, his safety, had to come first. The following Saturday, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. Jake was still in his room, the house eerily quiet. I took a deep breath and knocked on his door. No answer. I knocked again, a little louder. Still nothing. I pushed the door open slowly. He was lying on his bed, headphones on, staring at the ceiling. He didn't acknowledge me. I walked over and sat on the edge of his bed, trying to project a sense of calm I didn't feel. "Jake," I said softly, "we need to talk. Really talk. I know you're angry about the camera, and I understand why. What I did was wrong. I invaded your privacy, and I'm truly sorry for that. But what I saw, I can't ignore it." He finally took off his headphones, but he still wouldn't look at me. "I don't want to talk about it," he mumbled, his voice hoarse. "I'm not going to let you ruin my life." "Ruin your life?" I repeated, a pang of hurt in my chest. "Jake, I'm trying to protect your life. Smoking weed, vaping, do you really think that's good for you? Do you know what you're doing to yourself?" He finally looked at me, his eyes red and swollen. "You don't understand, Dad," he said, his voice cracking. "You don't understand anything." "Then help me understand," I pleaded. "Tell me what's going on. Who is that girl? Why are you doing this?" He hesitated, then a torrent of words spilled out. He told me about the pressure at school, not from bullies, but from the constant need to achieve, to be perfect. He told me about feeling lost and alone after his mom left, about missing her, and how sometimes he felt like a burden to me. He told me about the girl, her name was Chloe, and how she was the only one who seemed to understand him, who didn't judge him. He said she introduced him to vaping, then weed, as a way to relax, to escape the pressure. My heart ached for him. All this time, I thought I was doing enough, but he was clearly struggling, and I had been too blind, too caught up in my own worries, to truly see it. "Jake," I said, reaching out to put a hand on his arm, but he flinched away. "I hear you. I really do. And I'm so sorry you felt like you couldn't talk to me about this. But this isn't the answer. This isn't how you deal with pressure or pain. It's just a temporary fix, and it's dangerous." He looked away again, his shoulders slumped. "I know," he whispered. "I know it's stupid, but it helps, Dad. Just for a little while." That's when I knew this wasn't just about a camera anymore. This was about reaching my son before he spiraled further. This was about rebuilding trust, addressing his pain, and helping him find healthier coping mechanisms. I knew it wouldn't be easy. The road ahead was going to be long and difficult, filled with therapy sessions, difficult conversations, and a lot of patience. But I was determined. I was his dad, and I wasn't going to give up on him. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have confronted him about the camera and the drugs, or would you have approached it differently? What do you think was the best way to handle a situation like this? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Okay, so after that incredibly difficult conversation, a fragile truce settled between us. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Jake was still angry about the camera, but the anger was now mixed with a weary resignation, and perhaps a tiny flicker of hope that I actually heard him. I knew I had to walk a very fine line. I couldn't just sweep the camera issue under the rug, but I also couldn't ignore the much larger problem of his drug use and his underlying emotional struggles. The next morning, a Sunday, I decided to take a different approach. I went into the living room, specifically to the camera, and I manually unplugged it. Then, I went up to Jake's room and knocked. This time, he said, "Come in." He was sitting at his desk, staring blankly at his computer screen. I walked over to him, holding the unplugged camera in my hand. "Jake," I said, holding it out to him. I unplugged it. "It's off. And it's going to stay off until we can talk about how we move forward together." He looked at the camera, then at me. His expression was unreadable. "I'm still really mad at you, Dad," he said, his voice flat. "I know," I replied, my voice gentle. "And you have every right to be. I messed up, but I also need you to understand that what I saw on that camera, it scared me. It scared me because I love you, and I don't want to see you hurt yourself. That's why I did it, not to be malicious, but because I was afraid I was losing you." He didn't respond immediately. He just stared at the camera in my hand, then at his desk. Then finally, his gaze settled on me. There was still a wall between us, but a small crack had appeared. "So, what now?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Now," I said, "we get help. Not just for the weed, but for everything. For why you felt like you needed it. For the pressure. For feeling alone. We'll do it together. I'll go with you to every appointment, every session. And we'll figure this out." That day marked a turning point. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic healing, but a slow, arduous process of rebuilding. I found a therapist who specialized in adolescent issues and substance use. Jake was initially resistant, of course. The first few sessions were awkward, filled with long silences and one-word answers. But I stuck with it. I sat in the waiting room during his individual sessions, and I participated actively in the family sessions. It was during those family sessions that I started to truly understand the depth of Jake's pain. He talked about feeling abandoned by his mom, about the unspoken pressure he felt to be the good kid after she left, to make things easier for me. He talked about how my long work hours made him feel even more alone, and how he struggled with his identity, feeling like he didn't quite fit in anywhere. He even admitted that Chloe, the girl from the camera footage, was more of a casual acquaintance he experimented with than a close friend. He told me he felt embarrassed and ashamed that I'd seen him in such a vulnerable, compromising position. Hearing all of this, my heart broke for him all over again. I saw how much I had unintentionally contributed to his struggles, despite my best intentions. I apologized again, not just for the camera, but for my failures as a parent, for not seeing his pain sooner. It was incredibly humbling. The therapist, a kind and insightful woman named Dr. Evans, helped us both navigate the tangled web of our emotions. She taught us how to communicate more effectively, how to express our feelings without resorting to anger or withdrawal. She helped Jake understand that his feelings were valid, but that his coping mechanisms were destructive. As for Chloe and the weed, we addressed it head-on. Jake agreed to stop seeing Chloe if she continued to use drugs, and he agreed to regular drug testing. He also started attending some youth support groups, where he met other teenagers struggling with similar issues. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, moments of frustration, and arguments. There were times I doubted if we would ever get through it. But slowly, painstakingly, things began to improve. Jake's grades started to climb again. He started spending less time in his room and more time in the common areas of the house. He even started inviting some new friends over, kids who seemed genuinely supportive and were involved in healthy activities like a Dungeons and Dragons group. The camera remained unplugged for several months. I left it on the mantelpiece, a visible reminder of our painful past and our commitment to a more open future. One evening, about 6 months after the initial incident, Jake walked into the living room, picked up the camera, and handed it to me. "You can plug it back in now, Dad," he said, a small, genuine smile on his face. "I trust you, and I hope you trust me." My eyes welled up. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. It was a sign that we had come full circle, that the trust we had lost was slowly, but surely being rebuilt. I hugged him, tight, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like my son was truly back. The journey wasn't over, of course. We continued with therapy, and I made a conscious effort to be more present, to listen more, and to prioritize our relationship above all else. I learned that being a parent isn't about being perfect, it's about being there, about making mistakes and learning from them, and about loving your child unconditionally, even when it's hard. Looking back, I still grapple with the ethical dilemma of the camera. Was it right to use it? No, not really. It was an invasion of privacy, and it caused a lot of pain. But did it lead to the discovery of a serious problem that needed to be addressed? Yes. It forced a confrontation that, while difficult, ultimately led to Jake getting the help he desperately needed. So, I don't know if I was wrong or right. I was a scared dad making a desperate choice, and it had unforeseen consequences, both good and bad. The most important thing is that we got through it and we came out stronger on the other side. So, what's your take on all of this? Like this video if you were on my side, if you think I did what any parent would do in that situation. Subscribe for more stories like this, where I share the raw, unfiltered truth of life's messes and triumphs. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I want to know if you think the ends justified the means, or if I crossed a line that should never be crossed. I'll see you all in the next story.